Hello and welcome to another session of AVR120. Today we're going to be discussing particle effects, adding a muzzle flash to our gun, and then going ahead and adding an explosion effect to the crate when we subtract all of its health via gunfire. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is we need to download an asset pack to use in our scene. So we'll go ahead and go to the asset store. If you want to pause it, you can use this URL to go ahead and access this. Otherwise, if you just type in Unity Particle Pack 5 in the search bar, you should be able to go ahead and find it. And what you want to go ahead and do is click Add to My Assets. You may be prompted to sign in, like me. Just go ahead and do that. Sign in with your Unity ID. And you'll want to go ahead and open it in Unity once it's been added. Okay, so now we have it essentially added to our Unity assets. If you're not seeing this, you want to go to My Assets up at the top here where this drop down is under Package Manager. And you'll need to click the download. I've already downloaded it, so I'm just going to go ahead and import it into my scene. But if you're not seeing re-download, go ahead and click download here, and then you'll need to import. Okay, so we'll just import this entire thing here. Go ahead and click import again. Okay, so now it's been added to our scene. And it will be under effects examples here. So you're going to have an error, most likely, when this happens, and this is going to prevent you from actually running the application. So in order to fix that error, what you're going to need to go ahead and do is go up to the Window option, reopen your Package Manager, and what you'll go ahead and see is that it says the error pertains to this post-process manager. Um, and post-processing. So what you'll want to go ahead and do is go to the Unity registry here, drop down, and you'll see post-processing, and you'll see that most likely it says expired. So again, just click the drop down, you go to Unity registry, scroll all the way down to where the post-processing section is, and then we're going to update to 3.22. And so sometimes if you get those errors, try to take a look at where that error is coming from, and check your package manager to see if there is an update that's waiting for you. Otherwise, what I generally do is if I get a kind of weird error like this that's not pertaining to necessarily my code, I'll go ahead and I'll search that in Google. But a lot of times it's just certain packages might be out of date, so just try to go ahead and update those. Okay, so now that we've kind of got that settled here, what we'll want to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and start working on this muzzle flash. So the first thing we want to go ahead and do is in the hierarchy, you're going to click your player and you're going to open that up. Open up your main camera and go to the weapon holder, open that up, and let's go. We'll put this on the rifle for now. So we'll go ahead and I am going to right click on the rifle and I'm going to create, we're going to add a point light because we want essentially a light to go ahead and come on every time you shoot the gun. So we're going to want to add a light and then the particle system, which I had kind of referred to. So in terms of lights, if we right click on the rifle, since we're adding this muzzle flash to the rifle initially, and we'll go down to light, we'll see that we have all these different lights. And so just to go over quickly the lights, the directional light, a directional light is kind of a very bright light that is shown in a direction. In our scene, we actually have a directional light. You'll see at the top of the hierarchy here is one. And it basically it is kind of parented to our camera right now, but generally it kind of would represent the sun and some kind of light in that direction there. It's generally used to kind of represent the sun or environmental light. Um, uh, Spotlight is exactly what it sounds like. It's just a light that's like a spotlight would be. Basically, there's a very pointed area of light. The spotlight's basically just something that would look exactly like a spotlight in real life. There shines a light directly on an area. Different from a directional light in that the directional light is going to really kind of be a stronger light in a direction, but it will light up an entire area. Um, and then the area light actually lights up an entire area from its center outward. Um, and the point light is like a smaller, essentially light, like almost like a light bulb or something like that. So an area light would be like a big light source that's covering an entire area versus the point light which is kind of just a smaller, like a light bulb, a smaller light that's kind of just lighting a smaller area around it. And also shooting light in a certain direction. So we're going to go ahead and add a point light to our rifle. And we will go ahead and I'm going to set this active so we can take a look at it visually. And I'm going to take this point light and I'm going to just kind of move it out here like so, kind of towards the end of the gun. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to create a parent of this. So if I right click the point light in the hierarchy and I go to create empty parent, um, and excuse me, that was a mistake there. I'm going to right click and I'm going to create we're going to create the particle system now for the light. So if we right click the point light and we go down here to effects, we'll see particle system here. And our particle system essentially is shooting out all these little particles. So I'm also going to right click the particle system and I'm going to drag it out. I want to make it a parent of the point light. So I'm actually going to just drag it out from under the child point light, so it's its own separate object, and then I'm going to take the point light and drag it onto the particle system to make it a child, because I want the point light to be a child of the particle system. Okay, so what the particle system, the way the particle system works is it has a point with which it emits. So from this center point, from its transform, it emits particles from it, and we can adjust the different settings over here in the inspector. And so if I move this around, you can see the particles are all coming out in a certain direction from that from the center point of the object there. Okay. So we're going to adjust this with pretty specific settings to get the muzzle flash effect we want on our gun. And then we'll use a prefab for the explosion I was talking about. So we'll go ahead and let's go to our particle system here. And these settings are going to be pretty specific. So, pause if you need to. And we'll go ahead and start adjusting this. So couple things also I should mention. You can stop the particle system from playing in the scene via this, when you have it selected, via this kind of section down here. But it's going to play based on the settings. So this is just like when we're previewing it in the scene view. So I'm going to let it play because I want to adjust it as we're going here. So, okay, now going back to the particle settings here on the right, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to adjust the duration to 0.2. I'm going to turn off looping because I don't want it to be looping. I want it to just play once because it's, you know, supposed to be a muzzle flash, right? So it's supposed to play once on the fire. I'll go to start lifetime here, and you can adjust a lot of these settings from the drop downs. So I'm going to go to the start lifetime drop down here, and I am going to go ahead and click the drop down, and I want it to be random between two constants. So again, you hit the drop down under start lifetime, random between two constants, that option, and we're going to switch this between 0.04 and 0.06. All right. We'll go ahead and the start speed, set this to -1. The start size, we're going to set this to 0.16. The rest of these settings will stay the same. And then under start color, we're actually going to change this. So we're going to hit the drop down next to start color, at the end of the bar here. And again, this is going to be between two colors. So we'll click the first one here, and we're going to go ahead and make this a little orange. And so if we click the color, all right, you can adjust this is the color wheel, so you can kind of adjust the color this way. So I'm just going to set it to like this orange color. You can kind of set it to what you'd like. This is what it will initially start as, and I'm going to just set it all the way to this like very orange color at the top right hand side. So this will like adjust the intensity of the color, and this is like where you pick the circle is where you pick the color. Go ahead to this one here. I'm going to set this to kind of like a blue-ish, light bluish color, and you know, heavy intensity on that light blue there. We'll go ahead and leave most of this the same. We don't want it to play on awake. We don't want it to play like at basically at the start of the scene. And we're going to go ahead and scroll down. So let's now we have all these different options here, and these are actually, if you click in these boxes, there's more options within them. So the first one we're going to go ahead and do is adjust this emission. And so rate over time, all right, we want it to just play once essentially and control when it plays. So we're just going to set that to 0. But if we adjusted this, this is what allows it to play kind of continuously there, this emission. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we will add, we want it to be a burst because it's going to be a burst from the end of the gun. So we'll click the plus here. We'll add this kind of burst option. Under count, we'll hit the drop down menu and we will hit between two constants again. And they will both be 30. So we'll leave that as is. We'll have one cycle. Interval and probability will all stay the same. So all we're changing is the drop down and hitting the random between two constants under the emission field, okay, and leaving the number the same. And we're also setting the rate over time to 0. Okay. So now we'll also go, we want to unclick shape because we don't want the shape, it to really to affect the shape there. All right, so we'll go to color over lifetime. We want to check this, and we'll go ahead and set this again to this will change the color over a period. Controls the color of each particle during its lifetime, right? So we'll go ahead and kind of I actually just want it to be a gradient, and I'm going to leave it as is pretty much for the most part here. Okay, so we'll go down to lights now. We will click on the lights, and inside of lights here, we want to go ahead and drag this point light into the light slot there. And we will go ahead and we don't want the light to be on immediately, so we'll just go ahead and set it inactive for now. And so under lights, just drag in the reference to the point light there. For renderer, that looks fine. You just want to make sure that's on. Okay, and then now we're gonna go ahead and we need to adjust this the materials. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna find the material that we need to add, and so we can lock this really quick. So let's make sure you have the particle system selected. Go ahead and lock it so that we're not changing it. And then in our assets here, so you lock it with the top right, by the way, this little lock icon. In assets, we'll go to effect examples, and then in effect examples, we can click weapon effects, all right? And we can click materials, right? Because this takes a material. We need a material on this particle system. And I want to use this muzzle flash. So I'm going to go ahead and just drag the muzzle flash in here. That'll add it to the particle system, all right? And we can go ahead and maybe make the tint color a little orange, reddish orange maybe. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Blue. We're going to make it blue. So we'll just go ahead and make it light blue. Like so, under tint color. The rest of this looks correct. And we're leaving the tiling as 1. So if you wanted to use, one of the other effects, maybe like this like flame particle or like this flame round yellow particle, you'd have to set the tiling to 1. It would, when you drag it in, it would be like a different tiling, so you'd have to set the tiling to a different setting. Okay, so we'll go ahead now and that we have the setup there. Everything should be working pretty well. And I'm sorry, we need to adjust this actually material. So instead of tiling 1, we're going to set this to 2 and 2. I may need to adjust that back. We'll come back to that here. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and set this up via code. So we'll go ahead and in the gun script, you'll want to unselect this lock here so you actually can select things in the hierarchy again. All right, we're going to want to go to the rifle and then the gun script in there. We'll double click the gun script. Okay, now inside of the gun script, we want the particle effect to essentially play when we shoot the gun, right? So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to add another, we're going to add the reference to the particle system. So we'll create a public particle system muzzle, and we'll call it muzzle flash. And then inside of the shoot method here, we will go ahead and we can call the muzzle flash, and I'm actually going to do it after the audio. So call muzzle flash dot play, and we can actually, so it recognizes as a particle effect, right? The variables are set to particle effect, and on that particle effect, we have a couple different options. But play is the one that will actually play the particle effect. And so the idea here is that when we shoot the gun, it'll go into the shoot method, and inside of the shoot method, it'll play the audio and then play the muzzle flash effect there. Okay. So again, reference to the particle system and then playing the particle effect. Let's go ahead and save this and test it. Okay, so a few things we have to fix before we go ahead and test this. If we go to the muzzle flash, I had originally set this tiling for the materials to 2. This actually needs to just be 1. And the reason being is that if we look at the muzzle flash material, okay, so it was in effect examples and weapon effects, materials, and it was this muzzle flash here. Um, it's just one image here. Like this is 4, this dust particle. So you would need to set the tiling to like 4 to match what was on here. The other thing we're going to go ahead and need to change is so the light. The issue with the point lights is that we need to actually set this ratio up a little bit higher. So I'm going to do this to like 0.3. If it's set to 0, it's not going to, this light won't even show. So go ahead and save all those changes there, and then we'll test it. And it's only going to be on the rifle, so that's why it's not appearing on any of the other guns. All right, but we can kind of see that it does have light showing there. And the particle effect does kind of appear, right? So I don't particularly like where the particle effect is kind of happening. So what you can do is we can kind of go ahead and adjust it. So we can move the object maybe a little bit here and a little bit closer the actual particle system. Something like that. Gonna have to just keep adjusting it. That looks a lot better. So I'll just, sorry, we'll go ahead and run this. And it looks a lot better. And the sound, the light looks like it's working too. So that all looks correct there. So now that we have this muzzle object set up here, we can actually go ahead and make it a prefab. So if we go ahead and go to our assets and we go to create a new folder, so right click in the empty section of the assets, go to create and then folder. I'm going to call this prefabs. And we haven't made any prefabs yet, so I think we should probably start doing that. So I'm going to make the muzzle flash a prefab here. I'm just going to drag it into our prefabs folder. I'm also going to go ahead and make the first person player in its entirety a prefab, so I'll drag that in there as well. And that's pretty much all I want for now. But what we can go ahead and do is we'll go ahead and go to the first person player. And with all these weapons selected here, I'm just going to set this in active. We can drag the muzzle flash onto the pistol and the heavy weapon and the sniper here. And we need to make sure to reference this. So if we go ahead and make sure that you're referencing the right one. So just drag in the muzzle flash to each one of these scripts here, the gun scripts on the actual guns themselves. So click the gun, you'll see that the empty muzzle flash is there. So you just need to drag this from the hierarchy. So it's not exactly working right. So for all of them, we'd have to adjust it. So you'd have to adjust the positional values of the muzzle flash, for example, on the heavy, and you would just need to take a look at where the um, heavy weapon is, set it active so you can see it, and then look where the muzzle flash is. So it's a little off, right? We want it to be here, kind of at the end. I think it comes with a bullet prefab. That's why that bullet's there, or the prefab comes with that, but you don't see it, so it's not a big deal. But you could add actual, so we're using raycast. You can actually do projectiles from a weapon. So if you wanted to figure out how to instantiate some weapon projectiles, it's kind of similar to what we did with the 2D instance. You know, that's something to maybe check out and work on too. So just positioning this towards the end of the gun. Set the heavy back to inactive. And set the sniper rifle to active. Go to the muzzle flash and try to adjust the position so that it looks a little bit better. Looks like it's like kind of underneath it. It's not what I wanted. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think it looked okay with the pistol, but we'll just double check. I think the pistol's pretty hard to see, unfortunately. So we could, we could go to the cylinder and set its mesh render inactive so we can actually see the pistol. So again, to do that, I just went to the cylinder and then I just turned off this mesh render component so that that's like what allows you to be able to see the object, essentially. We will go ahead and just kind of adjust that somewhere in there, that range. Kind of just looking around to make sure that it lines up. I think that's about right. So it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And you can adjust it from there. You can make the muzzle flash bigger on the heavy, for example, or adjust the positioning. But I could probably do that for a while, so I don't want to take up too much more of the video on that. So we'll move on to the next topic. And I just sent all these inactive. You don't, so just make sure that you have all the weapons set inactive under your weapon holder. Okay, and so the next thing we're going to move on to now is adding a prefabbed. I'm just going to turn on the cylinders mesh render again so we can see it. Yeah. We're going to go ahead and add a prefab particle system to the one of the crates here. So I have mine in environment under objects and structures, and we have the wooden crate here. So go ahead and on the wooden crate, I'm going to put an explosion effect. So we'll go to our assets folder and effect examples, and in the effect examples, there is, we'll go into the fire explosions and then the prefabs for the fire explosions here. And there's a couple explosions. I think I'm going to use the small explosion, so I'll drag that prefab into the scene, and that's what that looks like there. So this is all done with the particle system we were just adjusting. So, if you click on this and you open up the particle systems, you can see how they did it. And so there's all sorts of different things you can do with this particle system, and you could just mess with all these settings for a while to create different things. So I encourage you to do that. Okay, so but the first thing we want to do for this one is don't want to I don't want it to loop, so I'll turn off looping, and I'm going to turn off play on awake because we don't want it to play on awake either. Other than that, that looks good, so we'll save it. We'll take the explosion effect, and we need to parent it to the wooden crate. So we'll drag the prefab onto the wooden crate, and then you need to move its position on to the center of the crate so the explosion's coming out of the crate, more or less. And maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. And you can use a different explosion effect too. I like this one's pretty nice. The big explosion's really cool too, so maybe check that one out as well. I'm going to try to get it kind of at the center of the box here. Okay, so now that we've got the setup, we're going to go ahead and click on the crate here, and we'll go to this target script. Let's click on that, and we're going to do something very similar to what we just did. So we'll go ahead and we will create a public variable of type particle system. So public particle system, and we will call this death explosion. And then what we'll go ahead and do is we'll go into the take damage method, and under the if statement, we'll say that when its health is less than 0, we're going to get access to this mesh render. So if you remember, I said the mesh render allows you to see the object. So we'll go into game object. This that will reference the game object that this is on. We'll use the dot notation and get component feature of Unity Engine. We will get the mesh renderer component, okay, on the object, in this case the crates mesh renderer. We will access this enabled field, makes the rendered 3D object visible if enabled, okay, and we will set that to false. Okay, and just as a reminder, what we're doing here is if we go back in, go back into Unity, oops, it's a different project, sorry. If we go back into Unity here, we're accessing this wooden crate, okay? We're using get component, okay? All these are components. We're getting the mesh renderer, okay? And we are accessing on the mesh renderer component this, which is its enabled field. And so when I click this off, it turns the visibility of it off, and I click it on, it turns it on. So that's what we're doing there. So back in the code here, now what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to now access that death explosion particle system, and we're going to use the .play function off of that. And we'll go ahead and save it, and we'll test it. And save, we'll test. And I made a mistake already. I need to reference the death explosion particle system. So open up the wooden crate, go to small explosion effect, and drag that onto the death explosion slot to reference that specific particle system. Go ahead and save this and press play. All right, and I'll shoot the crate a little bit, and oh, it doesn't play the particle system. So kind of knew that was going to happen, and the reason that is because what's happening here is we're calling the take damage function, and this is just going to happen too quick, essentially. It's going to execute far too quickly for the explosion to actually play. So this is where we're going to start talking about an extremely important feature that you should definitely take note of, and is kind of the next level in terms of Unity functionality, and it is called coroutines. So a coroutine, all right, is basically a function, and it's a function that allows you to kind of control how the time with which it's executed. So A coroutine allows you to spread the task across several frames, and it's a method that you can pause execution and return control to Unity, but then continue where it left off on the following frame. So you can pause the execution of it, do something else, and then come back to it. It's essentially Unity's kind of version of what's called multi-threading, which is having multiple functions run and stop and start execution at once there. So in most situations, when you call a method, it runs to completion and then returns control to the calling method, plus any optional return values. This means that any action that takes place within a method must happen within a single frame of update. So the explosion, so that the methods run once every frame when they're called, and so in our situation, the particle system doesn't play because it happens way too fast. Okay, so instead, what we're going to want to do is use this coroutine functionality here to just slightly pause the death effect, which will destroy the game object, okay? And we'll pause the destruction of the game object so we give the particle system just enough time to play its animation, and then we will destroy the object. So if we go back into this here, okay, we're going to kind of refactor this die um, method here. So refactoring is just changing the method, updating it, making it a little bit more, just making it better, basically, is what refactoring refers to. And with a coroutine, okay, this is the kind of call or the method signature of a coroutine is a little bit different. So it uses the IEnumerator interface, okay, and then after that it will be the name of the coroutine, just like a normal method, and with the parentheses as well. So everything's the same except that you just need the IEnumerator. Um, the next thing we're going to want to go ahead and do is you'll see that we're getting an error. It says it does not return a value. So coroutines need to return a value, and that basically what you'll need to do is run this kind of funky line of code at the end of each coroutine to basically pause its execution. So it is yield return null. All right, and that is the base kind of line of code you need to basically stop the execution of the coroutine. So now that we've got that all set up here, there's another nice piece of functionality with a coroutine, which is coroutines have loops that they can run. And so a coroutine, in addition to stopping and starting execution, it can just run in the background. And you could continue on with the program, and it could just be running checks consistently in the background the entire time that it's running. So what that looks like, what a loop in a coroutine looks like, is like this. So you'll use the while statement, like it's a while loop, and you'll actually use this inside of the while loop parentheses. You'll use the true. You'll create the curly braces, and your looping code will go in here. So in our scenario, we basically just want it to wait for 2 seconds and then destroy the game object, and then stop the execution of the application. So what we will go ahead and do now is we'll use another yield return null statement, but instead of yield return null, we'll use new, and you can see we have all these different options for how to pause the execution of the coroutine. So we can wait for a while, wait until. What we're going to want to do is wait 4 seconds. This is the one I use by far the most. It basically just suspends the coroutine execution for a given amount of seconds using scaled time. So we'll go ahead and access that. It's a function in the format of a function, so it takes a float seconds. And so I'm going to pause it for 2 seconds, let the coroutine play, and then destroy it. So just to kind of reiterate here, coroutines allow you to pause the execution of a function. It's basically a function that allows you to pause and restart its execution. In our scenario here, we are going to when the health gets to 0 for this object, we're going to turn off its mesh renderer. All right. We're going to play the death explosion coroutine. We'll go into the die function, and when we are in the die function, we're going to wait for 2 seconds. All right, and this will go into our loop. So this is a loop, and this is kind of loop. It's going to wait for 2 seconds, and then it will destroy the game object. Okay, and it will stop execution, and it should work. One thing to note, really, really important, if you're going to use this while true loop, you must have a yield return statement inside of the loop. If you do not have some sort of yield return statement, or likewise, you can use the break statement. So you could type in break, and that will break out of the loop, right? Either way, you need to have a way to get out of the loop. If you don't use your yield return statement in there or a break statement, this format is an infinite loop. So this will infinitely run and basically it's just going to crash your program. So I can't tell you how many times I've forgotten to put a yield return null statement or some sort of statement to stop the execution of a while true loop here. Basically, if you don't save your program and you run it, it will crash your program and you'll lose any sort of unsaved work. So just make sure that when you create something with a while true loop in it, coroutine with a while true loop that has a yield and return null or some sort of break statement in there, and you always, always, always save before you run something that has really any sort of loop, but in particular this while true loop in the coroutine. So to go ahead and fix this small explosion effect here, looping, we'll just need to actually go into the actual small explosion effect that's on the wooden crate here and open it up. And the reason this is happening is because we don't just turn off the looping for the top level object, but we need to go into all these objects and turn off looping. So you need to set this looping to false. They should all be checked by default. I unchecked them to like test this, and it worked out. So just uncheck all the light, embers, and fire objects underneath the small explosion effect to get it stopped from looping. Go ahead and save all that, and then go ahead and press play. And now when I shoot it, just plays once and plays the explosion there. You can turn down the audio too. I think my world audio is a little too loud, so I'm going to just turn the volume down quite a bit, maybe to like, 0.7 or something. Anyways, that will do it for today's session. Let me know if you have any questions. I encourage you to add more of the particle effects to the scene and kind of mess around with that there. Can do some cool things with it and those prefabs. Other than that, have a great rest of your day. Thanks.